Welcome to the Live and Invest Overseas podcast. Please visit us at liveandinvestoverseas.com/podcast for more information on living better and retiring well overseas.
Hey guys, and welcome to Money, a podcast devoted to all things money, how to get it, how to grow it, and how to keep it. I'm your host, Stacey Johnson, and this podcast is brought to you by MoneyTalksNews.com, serving up the best in personal finance news and advice since 1991. My co-host is money expert Miranda Marquit, or Miranda expert Money Marquit, from MirandaMarquit.com. Hello, Miranda.
Hey, Stacey, how's it going?
It is going well, and we also have with us today a special guest, Kathleen Petticord, from the publication Live and Invest Overseas, which is both, I believe, a hard copy publication and a website. Is that right, Kathleen?
No, everything we do is virtual. Everything is online. So we have a website, e-letters, subscription services, and books, but they're all online, delivered electronically.
Cool. Well, before we get started, Miranda, would you give us a little intro on what we're going to do today?
Yeah, so in the last few months, one of the biggest searches on the internet has been how to move out of the US. Well, none of us is likely to get out of here anytime soon, at least until our COVID-19 numbers level off. It doesn't hurt to take a look at the options. Kathleen Petticord, the publisher of Live and Invest Overseas, who you have already introduced, will join us today to talk about where to retire and how to make retiring overseas a reality.
So before we start, Kathleen, let me just tell you how I'm picturing this. I've got my toes in the sand. I've got a drink with an umbrella in it. I'm on the beach in some fabulous place. The water's crystal clear. The sand is white. The palm trees are gently swaying in the breeze, and it's costing me $1,000 a month. Can you make my dream come true?
I can. Everything you described up until the $1,000 is no problem. The $1,000 might be stretching it. And it has a lot to do, there's no hard and fast number for how much will it cost you to live in XYZ destination, because it's all about how you live. And that's true even in the United States. What's someone's budget living in Chicago, Illinois? Well, this family versus this family, you've prioritize different things, spend money different ways, live in different neighborhoods, and that makes a difference. But I can promise you that you could live on a white sand beach and have the kind of Kenny Chesney lifestyle you're describing on as little as $1,200 or $1,300 a month. So a little bit more than you're suggesting, but still less than the average monthly Social Security check, which right now is about $1,400.
This is awesome. I'm excited. And just to let you know, I live in Fort Lauderdale. I actually have my toes in the sand, and I'm drinking right now. So I'm really okay as it is, but just in case.
Oh my gosh, I live in Idaho, and I definitely do not have my toes in the sand right now.
But Idaho's beautiful also.
It is. It is really pretty.
And so, Kathleen, naturally, we have to ask, where are you? Where do you live?
Well, oddly enough, I'm in the United States. I'm in Chicago, which is why that came to mind for my example. But this is the first time I've been in the United States for more than a few days visit of family in 22 years. I normally live in Panama City, Panama, and Paris. We spend part of the year in Panama and part of the year in Paris. But because of a whole lot of complications, which everyone I know understands, everyone right now is facing these same kinds of travel and restriction complications. Here we are in Chicago, and we're not sure where we can go.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, you're obviously still a citizen of the United States.
We are. We also have Irish passports. We lived in Ireland for 7 years and acquired citizenship through residency there. So I think what we're going to do is go from here to Ireland, because unfortunately right now, Americans can't travel many places. And so it's fortunate that we have the Irish passports, and Ireland will let us come visit.
So now this brings, sorry.
Go ahead, Miranda.
This brings something up to me. So if you are planning to retire overseas, or you want to be able to travel more overseas, I mean, it used to be like the U.S. passport was the gold standard. That's not the case anymore. Do you recommend getting an international passport, getting residency citizenship?
Yeah, no, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry, but this is so much on my mind right now. I've been writing about this and recommending a second passport for more than 30 years. I've been, covering this beat, but And I've always believed it. And we went through the process of getting our Irish passports when we lived in Ireland. And it is a process, and
Sure.
it does, in our case, it took 7 years. But right now, I'm awfully glad we have them and our children have them. And the US right now, its passport is right there alongside the passports of Afghanistan and Iraq. That's how useful it is right now. An American can only travel right now to, I think it's 26 countries. It's temporary. This will change. This is an extraordinary time in our history, in the world's history, but it really makes a point. And if you've never thought about the idea of a second passport, or an option short of that is what we refer to as backup residency, which is the right to enter a country and stay there indefinitely, even if you don't have their passport. Either a second passport or a backup residency has become, I think, a kind of urgent agenda in the world right now. And the good news is, while it can take years to acquire one the way we did through residency, there are options that make it possible within 6 months or less.
So how much do those cost? Because
Hundreds
this
of
is a money
thousands of dollars
podcast.
normally.
Okay.
But a number of jurisdictions, it's funny, literally before we began talking, I was writing an article on this topic. So it's kind of in my mind, which is fortunate. A number of jurisdictions so hard hit by the complete disappearance of their touristic industries overnight, and their economies completely, beleaguered now, are offering new citizenship, second passport, and residency programs in an effort to bring in cash through a donation. They call it a donation. You're paying for the passport, and fair enough, it's fair enough. But they call it a donation. And so those can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. But a number of new programs are being offered by jurisdictions in the Caribbean and also in Europe, who are just so desperate for some cash flow. And the most affordable one that I've found in the research I'm doing right now is $150,000. And that is for Antigua. And one interesting thing is, a lot of programs increasingly offer not just a single passport, but a family package. So this program in Antigua, for example, is for up to 4 passports for a family of 4.
I'm lost here, guys. Explain what you mean. What's $150,000 for?
You're buying a passport. So
You mean you're literally paying them $150,000 for a passport, and that's it?
exactly.
That's a ton of money.
Historically, these programs have cost $300,000, $400,000, and $500,000. So, and
Whoa.
they're growing in popularity and in volume because you know it's a huge amount of money. It is, no question. But some people think it's a worthwhile investment. The option is to acquire one through residency, which is how we got ours, where it doesn't cost you anything but your time of being in the country.
How long?
It's anywhere from 4 to 7 years, depending on the
Oh,
country.
okay, a long time.
A long time.
Well,
yeah.
actually, so far, let's recap here, Kathleen, because we started this with my toes in the sand, a drink in my hand, and living in some country for $1,400 a month. And now you're telling me my passport's as useless as an Iraqi's or an Afghani's, and it's going to cost me $150,000 to get another passport. I'm really depressed. I'm glad I'm holding a drink.
I know.
Let's talk
I'm
about
sorry.
this.
This conversation
Inspiring.
has gone off the rails in a way. I understand, and I didn't mean to do this, but it's unfortunately it's the reality that we're facing right now. And the trouble is, no one has any idea how long this will continue. The EU has not allowed Americans for more than 6 months, has not allowed Americans to come travel for more than 6 months. I don't know how long until that will change. So, in the meantime, what we're telling readers is just, the whole world is on a kind of moment of collective pause.
Yeah.
So this isn't a time to become overwhelmed by, the restrictions and complications that we're all facing, although they can seem overwhelming in the way you just described. But it's a time to hunker down and do your research and your planning and your preparations to make a plan for what you're going to do when the restrictions ease and lift. And of course they will. This is not the rest of the world's history, is not going to be looking like the way the world looks right now. But while the world looks like it looks right now, and you really honestly can't travel many places, use this time to research. And then that brings us back to the more fun part of this conversation, which is, at some point, those white sand beaches will be open to you again, and you'll want to plan for getting there.
Well, thank you, Kathleen, for bringing me back. But so let's talk about some places. It doesn't have to be white sand beaches either. Let's talk about. Give me some examples of where I can live well for little money overseas. Tell me what number one place you would go
My
or you
number one
suggest.
choice is Portugal. I like Europe, and not everyone is cut out for the developing world or the tropics. So I like to point out that the old world continental lifestyle can be more affordable than you think, especially in Portugal, which is everything that we imagine of, cafe culture and history and architecture and museums. Portugal has all of that. It also has a very long coast. It has the best weather in Europe, more than 300 sunny days a year, very moderate, temperate winter. So the weather is great, nice, beautiful summer. They speak a lot of English in the Algarve region, which is the coastal region of Portugal. They have great health care. It checks all the boxes really, and it's very affordable. It's not going to be your $1,200 a month, which you can find in Central America, for example. But you could retire to Portugal on $1,500 or $1,600 a month, which is still a
That's
modest,
not bad.
I think, reasonable budget.
That's cheap, and that's
It
everything.
is. I
You're
agree.
talking rent, food, everything.
Yes, yeah. Not travel. And I say, this is you maybe think of it as a starter budget, but it includes, everything you need: rent, food, transportation, utilities, all the basics. But it won't include eating dinner out all the time if that's something you like to do, or,
Okay,
travel, etc.
fair enough.
Yeah. So
No, go ahead, Miranda.
I was just going to say, I had friends who actually lived in Spain for about 4 months just before the COVID lockdown, and they got back to the US just before the COVID lockdown, and they have mixed feelings about that situation and getting back here in time. But they lived in Spain for 4 months, and they were talking about how it was possible that for them to live a good life, have enjoy that lifestyle in Spain for less than it was costing them here in the US. And they were talking about, they want to kind of do that again. So I really like that you point that out. I know Portugal is different than Spain, but there are other places where you can do things like that and really kind of find kind of an expat kind of lifestyle
Yeah.
that's very affordable.
So give us another example. Where else?
Okay, so second on my list would be Belize, and I like to offer that as a follow-up to Portugal, because Portugal and Spain, there are many similarities between the two, and both are affordable. I think Portugal maybe a little bit more, but both are really great options if you want a kind of old world lifestyle. But some people want the lifestyle exactly as you described at the start of our conversation, and that's what you can find in Belize on that budget of, as on the mainland coast in the region called Corazao, which is on the northern mainland coast, where you've got the white sand coast and all of that breezy palm tree lifestyle. You can live there for $1,200 or $1,300 a month. There's an island offshore from Belize called Ambergris Caye that a lot of people know from Survivor and Temptation Island. I think several episodes of each were filmed on Ambergris Caye and kind of made it pretty well known, I think. It's a bit more expensive out there on the island. So maybe $1,500 or $1,600 a month, but still, again, reasonable budget. And for many, a legitimately dream lifestyle. A really important point about Belize is that the language is English, which for a lot of people, especially if you're looking at a move like this at retirement age, the idea of learning a new language is intimidating and maybe paralyzing, and I for a lot of people can be a reason to take this idea off the table. I don't think it should be. Learning a new language at a later stage of life is a great way to stay mentally fit. But if you're not up for it, in Belize, everybody speaks English.
I actually find myself struggling with English sometimes, but I guess I could try it. Okay, number 3, Kathleen. Where are we going to go next?
Number 3, I would say Colombia. And this one can be surprising to people because I think what we know about Colombia is Medellin and Pablo Escobar and that whole, horrible time in Colombia's history. But that's 25 years in the past, and Colombia has recovered in impressive ways. And I like to highlight the city of Medellin specifically, which is, I think, one of the biggest turnaround comeback stories in history, because during the era of Pablo Escobar, Medellin was not a place. It was everything you imagine it to be, and it was really trouble spot on the globe. Today, Medellin is winning awards for being the world's most innovative city. And I have spent a lot of time there. I have a home there, and it's 100% safe. I travel there by myself. I travel there with my children. It's friendly. It's South America rather than Central America, which I think is an important point because Central America can be very rough around the edges, and that's not for everyone. South America can be much more polished and developed and sophisticated, if you can use that word. And that is definitely true in Colombia, where in Medellin, for example, there are kind of strong European undertones in the way people dress, in the way they greet you on the street, and in the just how the respect they show for their city, for each other, for visitors to their city. The people of Medellin are very proud of their city, and I think rightly so because of how hard they've worked and how successful they've been at turning it around from what it was 25 years ago. It's right now maybe the best quality of life for your money that I think you'll find anywhere in the world because it's super cheap. Colombia is super cheap, Medellin is super cheap, and the US dollar is very strong right now against the Colombian peso. So it's even cheaper than ever. And so this is a place, Medellin is a place where you could live. This isn't a beach destination, it's in the mountains. So it's at a higher elevation, which is, it can be another plus. Some people don't want the, hot, humid tropical weather. Here you've got kind of spring-like climate year round. And you can live here on $1,000 a month. And you can
You're
live what
kidding.
I think can qualify as a quote unquote luxury lifestyle. It's that level of a city.
Kathleen, do you mind me asking how much you paid for your house?
In Medellin, well, we bought it 6 years ago or 7 years ago, and we paid less than 100 at the exchange rate of the time, less than $100,000. And today, in peso terms, it's worth 4 times what we paid for it because the property appreciation in that time. But the dollar is so much stronger against the peso than when we bought that it's worth twice as much in dollar terms, which leads to an important consideration when shopping destinations, which is currency exchange rates. I recommend that if you're going to be moving to a country that doesn't use the US dollar, and we'll get to one next that does, where it takes this whole currency question off the table, then one way to kind of hedge the risk of the currency adjusting against you is to put in place some income in that currency. So for example, a rental property, and we have this house which we only use not very often each year, so we rent it out. That generates income in pesos, and we keep those pesos in Colombia, and we can spend them when we are there. We can use them to pay the utilities for our house, et cetera, our local expenses.
And the legality of buying a house, you got through that easily? It wasn't hard to do?
No, it's not. In fact, in most of the world, it's not at all difficult at this point for a foreigner, an American, to buy property. There are just a handful of places that still impose restriction on foreign ownership of property, and those are all in Asia. But in the Americas and Europe, it's very straightforward and completely legal. And, you end up with freehold title, just as in the United States.
No, I have.
Oh, go ahead, Randy. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. So one of the things that we've seen in recent years is this sort of like we saw it in Italy actually, where people are like, come buy a house for $1, or
Uh-huh.
come buy buy this island for $1. Are there restrictions around that? Is that actually a practical way to
That's,
to
yeah,
buy
that's a really
property,
interesting
or
example
are there
because, yes, there
problems?
are restrictions around that. It's very exciting. And, Italy is this current COVID debacle aside, Italy's economy was really struggling, especially in the rural parts of that country. And so over the past, I think even decade, they started probably doing this a decade ago, certain mayors in certain very small towns and villages had the idea, let's sell these old rustic farmhouses, which Americans dream about, the whole under the Tuscan sun romantic adventure idea. Let's sell them for €1 or €5. But right, the catch is that the buyer then must commit, and it varies town to town, village to village. But the idea in general is you must commit to investing X amount of euros in renovating the property over X period of time. So, say you must commit to investing 80,000 euros to renovate the house within 2 years, for example. That might be typical. So, it's still a great way to end up with a farmhouse, renovated farmhouse
Yeah, I was
in
gonna say
Italy.
that's still a
That's
good
something you
deal.
want. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay. Oh, by the way, I also am going to guess where your next destination is going to be.
Okay. Can
It's
you guess?
Panama.
It
Is
is.
it Panama?
It is
You know how I
Panama.
knew? Because you said they use the same dollar.
Exactly. And so Panama uses the US dollar. And for a lot of retirees, that's a huge comfort because you don't have to worry that, okay, I have enough to live comfortably in this place now. And this will be true in Portugal with the euro, in Colombia with the peso. Belize pegs its currency to the dollar. So the Belize dollar is pegged to the US dollar 2 to 1. So it doesn't fluctuate. So you have, again, a kind of built in comfort about the currency. So if it worries you, you want to look at places. Panama, Belize, and Ecuador would be the three top choices where you would have no currency risk. Ecuador also pegs its currency to the US dollar. And Panama is a really interesting story. Panama could be said to be the most famous, other than Costa Rica, maybe, most famous retire overseas destination of all. We've been living there full time and now part time for 12 years and traveling there for about 25 years. And in those 25 years, the scene on the ground and accordingly following on, the cost of living has changed dramatically. So Panama City is a mini Miami. Panama City is a very developed city. It's no longer really even a developing world city. It has by far the best infrastructure anywhere in Central America or the Caribbean. It's all skyscrapers. If you just were to look at the skyline, you could imagine it were Miami. It's also way more expensive to live in Panama City today than it was certainly 25 years ago, but even 5 or 6 years ago. So I don't recommend Panama City for retirees. It's a great place to start a business, which is why we moved there to start the Live and Invest Overseas business. But elsewhere in Panama, certain points along the coast, and then there are some points in the mountains in the interior, especially, can be super cheap and can offer really, really comfortable, relaxed, charming lifestyles. So, for example, there's a town in the interior, as they refer to it, which is inland in Panama, called Santa Fe, and you could live in a very interesting, I think, outdoorsy kind of life. It's a part of the country where you would spend your days hiking, river rafting, rock climbing, swimming in waterfalls. It's that kind of a place. Beautiful, idyllic, clean, safe, and you could live there on $700 or $800 a month.
Wow.
Now, one reason a place can be as affordable as that, just to put it in perspective, is because honestly, there's not much to spend money on. So if you're someone who would go crazy if you couldn't have a regular shopping fix, if you really like shopping malls, well, there are no shopping malls anywhere near Santa Fe, Panama, for example. So there are no 5-star restaurants. So if that's your favorite thing to do, to fine dining is important to you, this wouldn't make sense. But if you're someone who wants a really outdoor, healthy, back to nature kind of life, I love Santa Fe, and my husband and I own a little piece of land there where we think about building a house on the river, and you could just settle in there and be very happy, I think.
So, Kathleen, you owned a little piece of the entire planet, it sounds like.
No, just a few places. But we've been at this a long time. I've been doing this more than 30 years, and my husband and I have been together doing this 22, 23 years. So it takes a while, but an emerging plan.
It sounds so exciting. I just like the idea of it. I've been sitting here, well, especially now that I haven't left my house in about a year, it feels like. I
Right.
want to get out there and look at some other stuff.
I mean, seriously though.
Yeah. So I don't know where we are in our list now. How many have we done? 4?
4, I could offer one more, which would be
One more.
Mexico. And
Okay.
here's
Oh yeah.
one interesting thing and relevant about Mexico is that it is one place Americans can go right now. and the you can drive to Mexico depending on where you live in the United States. So I have a friend who is part-time retired. He lives part of the year in California, which is where his children and grandchildren are, and then the rest of the year in Mazatlan, Mexico, on Mexico's Pacific coast. He drives back and forth. So the cost and the hassle factor for him is negligible. He loads up his pickup truck, he and his wife, and they drive back and forth. They have an apartment, a condo in Mazatlan, right in the center of the city. And here's the really cool thing about Mazatlan: it's a legitimately interesting and historic city with a Spanish colonial central square, which can make for a really nice city lifestyle. But it's a city right on the water, right on the coast, with a long white sand beach that goes right along the edge of the city. So his condo is both in the center of a city with real 21st century amenities. You know, it does have shopping malls and all those kinds of things that someone might want. But his view is of white sand beach and the Pacific Ocean. And it's Mazatlan is, I think, worth highlighting as well, because it's all these great things. It's so accessible. It's both a city and it's a beach, and it's really affordable. So Mazatlan is a place, I'd say, a $1,400 or $1,500 a month choice.
That's amazing. So here's my next question. Why is anyone still living in the United States? I mean, honestly, if you can live in these places, which sound awesome, for that low of money, why would any retiree stay here? I guess where I'm going here, Kathleen, is there must be some drawbacks, because this just sounds too good to be true. What would those drawbacks be?
Yeah, exactly. And so you mentioned a minute ago, boy, this all sounds wonderful. It is wonderful, but it's also a lot of hard work. And I think that one reason a lot of Americans, retirees, might not be doing this or thinking about doing this is because it just hasn't occurred to them. And so, discussions like this, I hope are helpful for people who are maybe struggling right now to live a comfortable retirement lifestyle on their budget, whatever their retirement budget is, or who just are wondering, boy, at this stage of life, I wonder, isn't there something more to life? Well, there can be. And a conversation like this puts that idea on people's radar when it maybe wasn't there before. But the other reason people don't do this is because when they start to look into it, you can be easily intimidated and paralyzed by the process of it. It's not that it's hard, but it's work. We publish all kinds of materials. I, for example, years ago put together something we call our Retire Overseas in 52 Days program. And it's a course, a how to retire overseas course. In 52 days, I walk through day by day. You get an email and it comes with attachments and blah, blah, blah. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. 52 days later, you've walked through, as I broke it down, into 52 steps of what you need to do to move to another country. So that gives you maybe some context. I broke it down into 52 steps because you've got to address things like your budget, but then you've got to look at residency, which we talked about earlier in this conversation. What will you need to do to be able to be a legal resident of that country? You don't need another passport. That's one thing to make clear. With your U.S. passport, normally you're very welcome everywhere. And I believe that will be the case again, I hope, much sooner rather than later. But even when the U.S. passport goes back to being one of the world's best travel documents, to stay indefinitely in another country, with U.S. passport, you'll be able to come in as a tourist. But to stay indefinitely beyond the tourist window, you need residency, and that's a process. Then you've got to look at healthcare and health insurance options. Many steps to that. That's a process. Then you've got to look at shipping. Do you want to ship your stuff or give it all to charity, sell it, give it to your kids, and buy new when you get there? If you have pets, are you bringing them or not? Utilities. Do you need a local driver's license? Setting up a local bank account, on and on, all the administrative stuff that goes into a life. Well, we spend a lifetime building it wherever we're living now. And then all at once, in a rush, you're trying to reinvent it in a new country in a foreign language. So there's a lot of paperwork, bureaucracy, and as I said, process. And that's not for everyone, and fair enough. It's, this isn't for everyone. I think the upsides and the advantages are huge, but it doesn't come without work. And then there's the language factor, which we already talked about. And for some people, that's a deal breaker.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, this 52-step program that you mentioned, does that cost money?
It does. I think I don't know. It's about $100.
Something worth doing, though, if you're really going to get serious about it. I also noted, Kathleen, that you have at least one book on Amazon about this topic.
I do.
So that's another place people can go to get some information.
Yeah, there's a book published by Penguin, How to Retire Overseas, and that's on Amazon. And you can get that, resold or used copies, whatever, for less than $10 normally. You can find one floating around. And then there's a new book published by Wiley called How to Buy Real Estate Overseas, which is if you're looking to make a move like this and you want to buy a home rather than renting. And one way to keep this easier is not to mess with buying a place to live, just rent. There's no reason to think you have to buy property. Buying property is a personal choice, or it can be an investment. But if you're just moving for the lifestyle adventure component, I really recommend that you just rent. Rents in a lot of these places are very cheap. It's easy, to find good, comfortable rentals, and it takes that whole property factor out of it.
Awesome. Kathleen, you've been such a great guest. It's so interesting because this is a topic, maybe it's not that interesting to other people, but I'm fascinated by it. I really am. And so I'm really happy we were able to talk today.
Well, thank you.
Miranda, did you have any other questions before we close?
No, I'm super excited to I love to travel, and I'm a little bit away from retirement myself, unlike Stacy, but I do like to travel, and so I really like the idea of maybe an extended stay in a different country when all of this is over. So this has been really great information that can be used even if I only like maybe go on sabbatical someplace, rather than full on retire. So thank you so much for coming.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
Thank you,
great to talk
Kathleen.
to you. And let me just say really quickly in closing, that's a great point about this isn't all or nothing, and it's so customizable. So it can take the form, what it's about is just experiencing what the world has to offer, going out there to see what else, the world has to offer, what it's like to be in other places, just as you're describing. And so it can be that just you take a series of trips, or it can be you go part-time overseas and spend 9 or 10 months still in the United States. So it's definitely not all or nothing, and it doesn't have to be at retirement age. At this point, at this, in day and age, you can do this at any age.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. And Kathleen, I just had a great thought. I'm 60. I'll be 65 next month. My idea is this: how about if I start going around the world and crashing at your various houses? Because that's going to be really inexpensive.
Well, sometimes we would actually really welcome that, because one other hassle factor element of this is if you own a home in another country, you have to take care of it, and that means you need someone checking in on it. If you aren't renting it and you don't have a rental manager checking in on it, we do sometimes we'll say to friends, if you're in this part of the world, would you mind please checking in just to make sure everything's okay for us? So we do sometimes welcome guests for that reason, if none other.
Well, I'll tell you what, our millions of listeners just heard a verbal contract being spoken. Thank you again, Kathleen. You're an awesome guest, and I hope we can talk to you again sometime.
Thank you so much. Great to talk to you guys. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of our Live and Invest Overseas podcast. For more, please visit liveandinvestoverseas.com/podcast, where you'll find lots more information and resources to help you live better and retire well overseas.